Wear long sleeves Thursday. No need for questions. Those were the last words he said to her that morning. Not goodbye. Not thank you for breakfast. Just an instruction about how to hide what he had done to her wrist the night before. Vivian stood at the kitchen window watching his black sedan disappear down the circular driveway. The fog was thick over the harbor this morning, swallowing the cargo ships whole, making them look like ghosts drifting toward some other world. She counted to 60 before she moved. She had learned that counting helped. It gave her something to focus on besides the throbbing in her wrist where his fingers had twisted until she dropped her phone. 58. 59. 60. Then she reached into the pocket of her silk robe and pulled out a phone he did not know existed. Welcome back to another powerful story, my beloved listeners. Kindly tell where you are watching from and what time it is where you are at. If you are new here, prepare for a story of betrayal, unexpected love, and what truly makes a family. Drop everything and listen closely. This tale of heartbreak and redemption might just change how you view love and family forever. The phone was a simple thing. Prepaid. Purchased with cash 3 months earlier at a store 40 minutes from their home. Registered under a name that was not hers. Hidden in places he would never think to look because Garrett Holloway did not believe his wife was capable of deception. He had spent 11 years training her to be predictable, manageable, small. She dialed a number she had memorized. Foster and Brenneman, how may I direct your call? This is Vivian Mercer. I need to confirm my appointment with Ruth Brenneman this morning. Yes, Mrs. Mercer. Miss Brenneman is expecting you at 9. She asked me to remind you to bring all documentation we discussed. I have everything. We will see you soon then. Vivian ended the call and looked at the breakfast dishes still sitting on the 12-foot mahogany table. His plate at the head. Hers at the opposite end. The distance between them had never felt like enough. She began clearing the dishes with the same precision she had used to prepare them. 4 scoops of coffee, not 3.5. Soft-boiled egg in its porcelain cup. Rye toast cut diagonally and buttered edge to edge. Every detail perfected over more than a decade because deviation invited correction. But this morning had been different. This morning, while she measured and prepared and performed the role of dutiful wife, she had been counting down hours instead of counting her blessings as he so often told her she should do. The bruise on her wrist was already deepening to purple beneath her sleeve. By tonight, it would be the color of ripe plums. By the time she appeared in family court, it would be photographed and catalogued and entered into evidence alongside dozens of others. He had no idea. That was perhaps the most satisfying part of all this. Garrett Holloway, the man who built a shipping empire from his father's modest fleet, the man who controlled ports on 3 continents, the man whose name appeared in business journals under words like visionary and titan, had no idea that his quiet wife had been planning her escape for 8 months. He thought last night's violence had put her back in her place. He thought this morning's silence meant submission. He thought the breakfast she served with her bruised wrist hidden beneath silk was an apology for asking about money that was rightfully hers. He was wrong about all of it. The morning Vivian Holloway became Vivian Mercer again began 8 months before the breakfast. It began with an open briefcase and a folder labeled with her name. She had not been looking for anything. That was the part that struck her later, in the quiet hours when she allowed herself to think about how close she had come to never knowing. She had simply walked through the study on her way to somewhere else and noticed the briefcase sitting open on his desk. Garrett never left his briefcase open. He carried it with him everywhere like an extension of his body, like it contained state secrets instead of shipping manifests and financial projections. The open latch was such an anomaly that she stopped walking and stared at it for a full 10 seconds before approaching. The folder was right on top. Manila. Ordinary. Labeled in his attorney's handwriting. Vivian Holloway. Dissolution planning. Her hands had trembled as she opened it. She would remember that later too. The trembling. The way her body understood before her mind caught up. Inside were documents that made her vision blur and her knees weaken until she had to grip the edge of his desk to stay upright. A post-nuptial agreement she had never signed. But there was her signature at the bottom, fluid and familiar, forged with such precision that she might have doubted herself if she did not know absolutely that she had never seen this document before. Property assessments valuing everything in his name alone. The house. The cars. The boat. The investment accounts. All of it his. None of it hers. A draft divorce filing citing her emotional instability and reckless spending as grounds. She who had not made a financial decision in 11 years. She who had to ask permission to buy new shoes. And letters. Pages and pages of letters between Garrett and an attorney named Harrison Webb, discussing strategy. How to minimize her settlement. How to establish that assets acquired during marriage were his alone. How to paint her as unstable. How to leave her with nothing after 11 years of cooking his breakfasts and attending his galas and wearing the dresses he selected and smiling at the people he needed to impress. She stood in his study reading those letters while somewhere upstairs a shower ran and her husband washed off the day, and she understood something fundamental about her situation. He was planning to destroy her. Not next year. Not someday. The timeline in the letters suggested he intended to file within 6 months. He had been building this case quietly for over a year while she made his coffee and pressed his shirts and believed, foolishly, that at least she had security if nothing else. She did not have security. She had a countdown clock, and she had not even known it was ticking. Vivian photographed every document in that folder. She worked quickly because the shower could shut off at any moment and she could not explain why she was in his study with her phone pointed at his papers. The photographs were not perfect. Some were slightly blurred. Some caught her own shadow at the edge of the frame. But they were enough. She replaced everything exactly as she had found it. Closed the folder. Closed the briefcase. Walked out of the study on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. That night, lying beside him in the bed they had shared for 11 years, she did not sleep. She stared at the ceiling and listened to his breathing and thought about the woman she had been when she married him. 28 years old. Junior curator at the Maritime Museum where he was a significant donor. Smart and curious and drawn to his certainty, his decisiveness, the way he seemed to know exactly what he wanted and how to get it. She had not noticed the early signs. The way he corrected her opinions at dinner parties as though she were a child who had spoken out of turn. The way he suggested she did not really need to work when his income was more than enough for both of them. The way her friends stopped calling because he always had reasons why their visits were inconvenient. The first time he grabbed her arm hard enough to leave bruises, she told herself it was an accident. He had been stressed. She had said the wrong thing. She would be more careful next time. There was always a next time. Now she was 39 years old and she had no job, no independent income, no credit cards in her name alone, no car titled to her, no bank account he did not monitor. She had a closet full of expensive clothes he had selected and a house that felt like a museum and a husband who was planning to divorce her and leave her penniless while pretending she was the unstable one. But she also had photographs of every document in that folder. And lying there in the dark, listening to him breathe, Vivian began to plan. The attorney's name was Ruth Brenneman. Vivian found her through careful research conducted on public computers at the library, searches she never made at home where Garrett might check her browsing history. Ruth specialized in complex divorces, high-asset cases, situations requiring discretion and strategy. Her firm occupied a converted brownstone in a neighborhood far enough from the business district that Vivian was unlikely to encounter anyone who knew her husband. The first consultation cost $500. Vivian paid in cash she had accumulated over months through small acts of financial rebellion. Returning purchases and keeping the refunds. Selling pieces of jewelry Garrett had forgotten he gave her. Skimming $20 here and there from the grocery budget he deposited into an account he believed she was too simple to manage creatively. $500 felt like a fortune. It felt like freedom pressed into her palm. Ruth Brenneman was in her mid-50s. Gray hair cut short. Reading glasses that she pushed up her nose when she wanted to examine something closely. She had a calm presence and no patience for pretense, and when she asked Vivian to tell her about her situation, she listened without interruption for 45 minutes. Vivian told her everything. The control that had begun early and intensified over the years. The isolation from friends and work. The financial manipulation. The physical violence that started as grabs and progressed to shoves and had recently escalated to something that felt more deliberate, more punishing. She told her about the documents in the briefcase. The forged signature. The plan to leave her with nothing. When she finished, Ruth leaned forward and removed her reading glasses. Your husband is planning to destroy you legally before you have a chance to defend yourself. This is not uncommon in cases like yours. Controlling men often move to secure assets the moment they sense their grip loosening, even if that loosening exists only in their imagination. Vivian nodded. She had suspected this, but hearing it spoken aloud made it real in a way that hurt. What we need to do, Ruth continued, is move faster than he does. But more importantly, we need to move smarter. Can you do that? Can you stay calm and play the role he expects while we build your case? Vivian thought about 11 years of playing roles. Of performing contentment. Of making herself small and agreeable and invisible. Yes. Good. Here is what you need to do. The list was specific. Document every incident. Photograph every injury. Date everything. Record conversations when it was safe to do so. Establish a bank account he did not know about. Gather financial records, property documents, any evidence of hidden assets or fraud. Find a safe place to go when the time came. Tell no one who might accidentally reveal the plan. One more thing, Ruth said as Vivian gathered her purse to leave. The forged post-nuptial agreement. That is not just a threat to you. If he used company resources or personnel to create that document, if it implicates the business in any way, that is fraud. Corporate fraud. The kind of thing that makes board members very nervous. Vivian had not thought of it that way. We may be able to use that, Ruth said. When the time is right. For now, document everything. Build your case. And stay safe. The most dangerous time for someone in your situation is when they leave. We need to do this carefully. Vivian left that first meeting with a list of instructions and something she had not felt in years. Hope. The months that followed required a kind of patience Vivian had not known she possessed. She became two people living in one body. The wife who served breakfast and attended galas and wore the right dresses. And the woman who documented her own suffering with clinical precision, building a case that would eventually set her free. She kept a notebook hidden in her closet behind winter coats Garrett never touched because he considered such things beneath his attention. The notebook was small, spiral-bound, the kind a student might use for lecture notes. Inside, she recorded every incident. Date, time, description, witnesses if any. November 3rd. 8:47 p.m. Argument about attending his colleague's retirement dinner. He grabbed my upper arm when I said I wasn't feeling well. Bruises visible by morning. No witnesses. Photographed. November 19th. 11:15 p.m. Questioned credit card statement showing charge at restaurant I did not recognize. He pushed me against the hallway wall and told me I had no right to question his spending. Left side of my back bruised. No witnesses. Photographed. December 8th. Time uncertain. After midnight. I was asleep when he came home. He was drunk. Accused me of moving items in his study. Grabbed my hair and shook me. No visible injury. Recorded the aftermath on phone when he fell asleep. Entry after entry. Page after page. A history of abuse written in neat handwriting that did not shake even when her hands wanted to. She photographed every bruise. Multiple angles. Her phone's camera became an instrument of documentation. She would stand in the bathroom with the door locked and photograph the marks on her arms, her shoulders, once the unmistakable print of his hand on her thigh. She dated each image. Uploaded them to a secure cloud account she had created using an email address he did not know about. Evidence. Insurance. Proof. She also discovered his affair. It happened in January, 3 months into her planning. She had become adept at gathering information without appearing to look. Credit card statements. Calendar entries he thought were private. The occasional glance at his phone when he left it unattended. Her name was Margot. 20 years younger than Garrett. Worked in investor relations at a firm his company did business with. Vivian found emails first. Professional tone at the start, then gradually warmer. Inside jokes. References to dinners that did not appear on his official calendar. Then photographs. Margot smiling at a restaurant table with candles between them. Margot on what appeared to be his boat, the one he told Vivian was being serviced. Margot in a hotel room with her head on a pillow that was definitely not theirs. Vivian printed the photographs and added them to her evidence folder. She did not cry. She was not sure whether that said something about her emotional state or about how little she had left to lose. The affair was not a surprise. It was simply additional ammunition. She told only one person about any of it. Colleen was her younger sister by 4 years. A hospice nurse who lived 3 hours away in a small town where she had built a quiet life after her own difficult divorce. They had always been close, but that closeness had been stretched thin by Garrett's careful isolation. Phone calls that used to last an hour had shrunk to 10 minutes because he was always nearby and Vivian never knew when he might be listening. In February, Vivian drove to see her. She told Garrett she needed to help Colleen sort through their late mother's belongings. He approved the trip because it sounded boring and domestic. She told Colleen everything in a single afternoon. The abuse. The documents. The forged agreement. The affair. The escape plan that was slowly taking shape. Colleen cried. Then she got angry. Then she wanted to drive back with Vivian right that moment and confront Garrett with everything. You cannot, Vivian said. If I confront him now, he wins. He has the money. He has the lawyers. He has spent 11 years making sure I have nothing. I need to be strategic. I need to be ready. Colleen argued. But eventually, she understood. What can I do? She asked. Help me disappear when the time comes. They made plans. Colleen opened a bank account where Vivian could transfer money. She rented a storage unit where Vivian could send boxes of irreplaceable items. She agreed to become the invisible support system that would catch Vivian when she finally jumped. Before Vivian left, Colleen held her for a long time. I have been waiting for you to be ready, Colleen whispered. I have been watching you disappear into that marriage for years. I did not know how to help. I did not know if you wanted help. I did not know I needed it, Vivian said. I thought this was just what marriage was. It is not. It should never be. Vivian drove home with new resolve. 3 hours of highway giving her time to think, to plan, to imagine a future that did not include Garrett Holloway controlling every detail of her existence. She stopped at a store 40 minutes from her house and paid cash for a prepaid phone. Her lifeline. Her escape hatch. The thing that would eventually save her. Spring arrived slowly that year. Vivian measured its progress through flowering trees visible from her kitchen window and through the growing thickness of her evidence folder. Both things blooming at their own pace. She took a job in March. 15 hours a week at a non-profit organization that provided assistance to families in crisis. The irony of this was not lost on her. A woman in crisis helping other people navigate their own disasters. She told Garrett she had joined a book club that met twice a week. He barely listened to the lie. He was too busy with his own secrets. Too confident in her compliance to question where she spent her afternoons. The pay was minimal. But every dollar went into the account Colleen had opened for her. By April, she had accumulated $2,000. By June, $4,000. By August, nearly $8,000. More money than she had controlled in 11 years. Money that was hers. Money that represented something beyond commerce. Freedom. Independence. The beginnings of a life that belonged to her. She also found an apartment. Ruth had connected her with a housing advocate who worked with survivors. The apartment was small. 1 bedroom. Walls that needed fresh paint. Kitchen barely big enough to turn around in. But it had windows that faced east, and Vivian stood in its emptiness one afternoon while Garrett was at work and imagined filling it with colors he would never approve. She signed the lease under her maiden name. Vivian Mercer. The name she had been before him. The name she would become again. She sent boxes to Colleen's storage unit. Photo albums from her childhood. Her grandmother's jewelry that had been her mother's before that. Books she had collected before Garrett decided her reading habits were frivolous. Small items that would not be missed but could not be replaced. She was building an exit. Constructing it piece by piece while performing contentment in the house that had become her prison. And then it was September, and Garrett grabbed her wrist and twisted until something fundamental shifted inside her. The argument had been about money. It was always about money. Vivian had noticed a transfer from their joint investment account. $40,000 moved to somewhere she could not trace. She should have let it go. She knew that even as she opened her mouth. But 8 months of planning had changed something in her. She was tired of pretending she had not noticed the discrepancies. She was tired of performing ignorance. I saw the transfer from the investment account, she said during dinner. The 40,000. Is that for a business expense? His fork stopped halfway to his mouth. He set it down carefully. His face did the thing it always did when she crossed an invisible line. First the stillness. The calculation. Then the cold voice. Where do you get off checking the investment accounts? I was not checking. The notification came through on my phone. Turn off your notifications. I just wanted to know what it was for. You just wanted to know, he repeated. His voice was quiet. That was always worse than shouting. The quiet meant he was deciding what to do with her. That money is mine, Vivian. I earned it. I manage it. You do not get to ask questions about what I do with my own finances. It is our money, she said. Our accounts. Our marriage. That was the wrong thing to say. He was around the table before she could stand. His hand closed around her wrist and twisted. She dropped her phone. The screen cracked against the tile floor. Your money, he said, his face inches from hers. You have not earned $1 in 11 years. You live in my house. You eat food I pay for. You wear clothes I buy you. Everything you have, I gave you. And you want to question me about moving my own money? The pain was sharp and specific. She felt something grind in her wrist, not broken but close. You should be grateful, he continued. Any other man would have left you years ago. You contribute nothing. You are nothing without me. He released her wrist and stepped back, straightened his jacket, picked up her broken phone and set it on the table. Get a new phone tomorrow. And do not check the accounts again. Then he walked upstairs. She heard the bedroom door close. Vivian sat at the dining table holding her throbbing wrist and looking at the broken phone and feeling something she had not felt in years. Not fear. She was long past fear as a primary emotion. What she felt was certainty. This was the last time. The last bruise she would photograph. The last injury she would document. The last night she would spend under his roof. She had been planning to wait another month. To gather a few more pieces of evidence. To make sure everything was perfect before she moved. But sitting there in the silence of the house he controlled, she understood that perfect was the enemy of free. She had enough evidence. She had a place to go. She had money and support and a legal strategy ready to execute. What she did not have was any more patience for performing the role of his victim. She picked up the broken phone. The screen was cracked, but it still worked. She texted Colleen. Tomorrow. The response came back immediately. I will be there. Vivian went upstairs. She lay in bed beside the man who had just injured her, listening to him breathe, and she did not sleep. She was too busy running through the checklist. The calls she would make. The documents she would need. The sequence of events that would unfold over the next 12 hours. He thought he had put her in her place. He thought the violence had reminded her who held the power. He thought her silence was submission. He had no idea that silence was the final act of a play she had been writing for months. The morning that changed everything began at 5:42 a.m. Vivian was already awake. She had barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the next steps laid out like tiles leading toward a door she was finally ready to walk through. She went downstairs to the kitchen. Made his coffee with the same precision she always did. 4 scoops. Water to the second line. Carafe positioned correctly. The routine was armor. The familiarity was camouflage. Her wrist ached as she cracked the eggs. 3 of them, sunny side up, just how he liked. The bruise had darkened overnight. It would photograph beautifully. She heard his footsteps on the stairs. Heavy. Unhurried. The walk of a man who believed he owned everything beneath his feet. Garrett entered in his charcoal suit. The one tailored in London. The one he wore when meeting with investors or board members. He sat at the head of the table without looking at her. Picked up his tablet and began scrolling through port reports while he ate. The Hensworth Gala is Thursday, he said without looking up. Wear the grey dress. The beaded one. All right. And do something about your hair. It looked tired at the last event. All right. He finished his eggs. Wiped his mouth. Checked his watch. At the door, he paused and looked at her wrist. She had covered it with her sleeve, but the fabric had slipped slightly when she reached for her coffee cup. Wear long sleeves Thursday. No need for questions. Then he was gone. Vivian sat in the silence for 60 seconds. Then she pulled out her hidden phone and called Ruth's office. The next 4 hours moved with the precision of a military operation. At 7:30, Ruth called back to confirm. Process server scheduled for 2 p.m. at his office. Emergency protective order already signed by a judge. Bank withdrawal approved and scheduled for noon. At 8:15, Colleen arrived. She had driven through the night. Her face was tired, but her eyes were fierce. "Where do we start?" she asked. "Everywhere." They moved through the house systematically. Vivian had made lists. She knew exactly what she needed and exactly where everything was. Her documents first. Birth certificate. Social security card. Passport. All in the filing cabinet in Garrett's study, where he kept important papers because he did not trust her with access. She had the combination. She had watched him enter it months ago and memorized the sequence. Her grandmother's jewelry from the box in her closet. Photo albums from the hall closet. The few books that mattered to her. Clothes she had chosen herself rather than ones he had selected. They loaded both cars. Vivian kept checking the driveway even though she knew Garrett was at work. 11 years of hypervigilance did not disappear because freedom was finally in sight. At 11:30, they finished. Colleen took her car back to the apartment to begin unloading. Vivian drove to the bank. Ruth's colleague was waiting in the parking lot. A woman named Diana who specialized in the financial aspects of difficult divorces. She had a leather briefcase and an expression that suggested she had done this many times before. The joint account held a significant sum. Enough to make the bank manager uncomfortable when they asked to withdraw half. "Have you discussed this with your husband?" the manager asked, his pen hovering over the paperwork. "I am not required to discuss anything with him." Diana's voice was calm but firm. "This is a joint account. She has legal right to these funds. The documentation is in order." The manager tried twice more to delay. Each time, Diana shut him down with citations and precedents and the quiet authority of someone who knew the law better than he did. By 12:15, Vivian walked out of the bank with more money than she had controlled in her entire marriage. She sat in her car and stared at the certified check and felt something crack open inside her chest. She was not sure if she was going to laugh or cry. In the end, she did neither. She simply drove to her apartment and began unpacking boxes. At 2:07 p.m., while Vivian hung curtains in her new bedroom, a process server walked into the glass-walled conference room of Holloway Maritime's headquarters. Garrett was in the middle of a board meeting. 12 of his colleagues and partners surrounded the polished table, discussing quarterly projections. The server entered, asked to confirm his identity, and placed an envelope in his hands. 12 faces watched him open it. Petition for divorce. Allegations of domestic violence with photographic evidence. Claims of financial fraud including forged documents and hidden assets. Emergency protective order prohibiting all contact. His wife, his quiet, manageable, predictable wife, had filed for divorce. And she had done it in a way designed to ensure maximum humiliation. "Excuse me," Garrett said. His voice sounded strange even to himself. "I need to handle a personal matter." He walked out of the conference room feeling their eyes on his back. He made it to his office. Closed the door. Read the documents again. Then he drove home. The house was empty. Her clothes were gone. Her jewelry was gone. The photographs she had kept of her family were gone. On his pillow, he found her wedding ring. Just the ring. No note. No explanation. He called her phone. Disconnected. He called her sister. Colleen's voice was cold as ice when she answered. "Do not call this number again. Do not come to my house. I have cameras. If you show up, I am calling the police. I just need to talk to my wife. Your soon-to-be ex-wife who wants nothing to do with you. Leave her alone, Garrett." She hung up. Garrett stood in the center of his empty bedroom holding a wedding ring his wife had left behind and trying to understand how everything had gone so wrong so fast. She was supposed to be manageable. She was supposed to be grateful. She was supposed to need him too much to ever leave. Instead, she had been planning. For months, apparently. Documenting. Preparing. Building a case against him while he ate the breakfast she cooked and critiqued the dresses she wore and believed completely in his own power. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Ruth Brenneman, attorney for Vivian Mercer. You are hereby notified that an emergency protective order has been granted. You are prohibited from contacting Miss Mercer directly or indirectly. Violation will result in immediate arrest. Vivian Mercer. She was using her maiden name. Already. As if their marriage had been nothing more than a costume she could remove at will. Garrett sat on the edge of the bed they had shared for 11 years and felt something he had not experienced in decades. Fear. He was afraid. Because for the first time in his adult life, Garrett Holloway was not in control of what happened next. 600 miles away, in a small apartment with walls she planned to paint yellow, Vivian Mercer stood at a window watching the sun set. Her wrist still ached. The bruise would take weeks to fully fade. But already it felt different. Not like evidence of her powerlessness, but like proof of what she had survived. Her phone buzzed. Colleen checking in. How do you feel? Vivian thought about the question. How did she feel? Terrified. Exhausted. Exhilarated. Free. She typed back a single word. Alive. And for the first time in 11 years, that word was not a description of mere survival. It was a promise. But as Vivian stood in her new apartment watching the sun disappear below the horizon, she did not know what was waiting in the documents Ruth had filed. She did not know about the connection between the forged postnuptial agreement and 3 ongoing business deals worth hundreds of millions of dollars. She did not know that the board of Holloway Maritime had already received their own copies of certain evidence. She did not know that Garrett's careful plans to destroy her had left a paper trail that would destroy him instead. She did not know that the man who had controlled her life for 11 years was about to lose everything. And she did not know that in exactly 4 days, a phone call would reveal a truth that would change how she understood the entire marriage. All she knew, standing there in the fading light, was that she had taken the first step. The rest of the journey was still waiting. She was lying on the couch in her new apartment, too exhausted to move to the bedroom but too wired to sleep. Colleen had gone back to her hotel after helping unpack the essentials. The apartment was quiet in a way Vivian had forgotten quiet could be. No footsteps to listen for. No breathing to monitor. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic on streets she did not yet know. Her phone buzzed. The hidden phone. The one only Ruth and Colleen had the number to. But the text was not from either of them. You are going to regret this. Unknown number. But she knew who it was. Of course she knew. Another buzz. After everything I have done for you. This is how you repay me. Then another. You cannot survive without me. You will come crawling back within a month. Vivian stared at the screen. Her heart was pounding but her hands were steady as she screenshot each message and forwarded them to Ruth. The response came back within minutes. Document everything. Do not respond. I am calling the police to file a report. This is violation of the protective order. Vivian blocked the number and set her phone face down on the coffee table. She pulled a blanket over her shoulders and stared at the ceiling of her new home. He could not help himself. Even now, even with a court order prohibiting contact, he could not resist trying to control her. Trying to frighten her. Trying to pull her back into his orbit through sheer force of will. But his words had landed differently than he intended. You cannot survive without me. She had heard variations of that sentence for 11 years. She had believed it for most of them. But lying there in an apartment she had rented with money she had saved, surrounded by belongings she had chosen, she understood something that Garrett Holloway would never understand. She was already surviving without him. She had been surviving without him for 8 months. Planning and documenting and building an escape route while he ate his perfectly prepared breakfasts and believed himself in control. His texts were not threats. They were evidence. Evidence that he could not accept losing power. Evidence that he would violate court orders because he believed rules did not apply to him. Evidence that would strengthen her case and weaken his. Vivian pulled the blanket tighter and closed her eyes. For the first time in 11 years, she fell asleep without listening for footsteps. The board meeting happened 4 days after Vivian left. She learned about it from Ruth, who had received a call from the corporate counsel at Holloway Maritime. The forged postnuptial agreement had implications beyond her divorce. If Garrett had used company resources to create fraudulent documents, if employees had been involved, if the forgery touched any of the business dealings currently under regulatory review, then the company itself was exposed. Boards of directors did not like exposure. They did not like scandal. They did not like the possibility that their visionary CEO had been committing fraud in his personal life while representing the company in negotiations worth hundreds of millions of dollars. The emergency meeting was called for Thursday morning. Vivian imagined Garrett walking into that conference room expecting to manage the situation the way he managed everything. Expecting his colleagues to take his side. Expecting his reputation to shield him from consequences. She imagined his face when he realized it would not. Ruth called her that afternoon with the results. Administrative leave. Pending investigation. They want to review all his recent transactions, personal and professional. The forged agreement opened a door they did not know existed, and now they are looking at everything. What does that mean for me? It means his leverage is crumbling. A man under investigation for fraud does not make a sympathetic figure in divorce court. It also means he is going to become more desperate, so please continue being careful. Vivian was careful. She varied her routes when she left the apartment. She kept her phone charged and her doors locked. She documented every attempted contact, every violation of the protective order. Ruth filed reports with the police. A pattern was emerging. A pattern of a man who believed he was above consequences and was slowly discovering he was not. The social collapse happened gradually and then all at once. First, his children stopped calling. Garrett had 2 from his first marriage, both adults now, both with complicated feelings about their father. Vivian had tried to build relationships with them over the years, but Garrett had kept her at a distance from his first family, as if they belonged to a part of his life she was not permitted to access. Now they were not returning his calls. She learned this from Ruth, who had learned it from various sources. The children had heard about the allegations, the photographs, the documented abuse. Whatever complicated feelings they had about their father had apparently not included knowing he was capable of this. Then his friends. The men he golfed with on Sundays. The couples they had dinner with monthly. The social circle that had validated his image as a successful, respectable, enviable man. One by one, they became unavailable. Busy. Out of town. Unable to make it to events he was no longer being invited to anyway. Then Margot. Vivian learned about this one through a forwarded screenshot. Ruth had contacts who monitored certain communications as part of building the case. Margot had sent Garrett a final message. I cannot be involved in this. What we had was not real and you know it. I hope you get help. Please do not contact me again. 23 words. That was all it took to end an affair that had been going on for over a year. 23 words and the woman he had risked his marriage for was gone. Vivian read the message and felt nothing. Not satisfaction. Not vindication. Just a kind of distant recognition that consequences were arriving, one after another, like waves reaching a shore. She had not caused these consequences. She had simply stopped protecting him from them. The first therapy session was harder than leaving. Vivian had resisted the idea initially. She had escaped. She was safe. She was building a new life. What more was there to discuss? But Ruth had insisted. The legal process would be long. There would be depositions and court dates and moments when she would have to face Garrett across a room and describe what he had done to her. She needed support that went beyond legal strategy. The therapist was named Dr. Eleanor Vance. Mid-60s. Warm eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. An office full of plants and soft lighting that felt nothing like the stark spaces Vivian had grown accustomed to. Tell me why you are here, Dr. Vance said. Vivian opened her mouth to give the simple answer. Divorce. Abuse. The standard categories. Instead, she started crying. She cried for 20 minutes. Great heaving sobs that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than her body. Dr. Vance did not try to stop her or comfort her or tell her everything would be okay. She simply sat and waited and occasionally pushed the tissue box closer. When the tears finally subsided, Vivian felt emptied. Hollowed out. But also somehow lighter. I think, she said slowly, that I have been holding that in for 11 years. Dr. Vance nodded. Grief and relief often arrive together. You are mourning the life you thought you would have, the person you thought you married, the years you lost. And you are also releasing the tension of survival. Your body has been in fight or flight mode for a very long time. It needs to discharge that energy. I feel like I should be happy. I am free. Why am I not happy? Because freedom is more complicated than escape. You have left the situation, but the situation has not left you yet. There is work to do. Patterns to unlearn. A sense of self to rebuild. This is not failure. This is simply the next part of the journey. Vivian came back the following week. And the week after that. Dr. Vance helped her understand the mechanisms of abuse. The slow erosion of autonomy. The way control masquerades as care. The isolation that happens so gradually you do not notice until you are completely alone. She helped Vivian recognize her own strength. The planning she had done. The evidence she had gathered. The courage it had taken to leave. You saved yourself, Dr. Vance said during one session. I need you to understand that. No one came to rescue you. You built your own escape route and you walked through it. That is not nothing. That is everything. The words settled into Vivian's chest like seeds. She was not sure yet what they would grow into, but she could feel them taking root. The support group met on Wednesday evenings in the basement of a church 3 miles from her apartment. Vivian had resisted this too. The idea of sitting in a circle with strangers and talking about her trauma felt exposing in a way that made her want to run in the opposite direction. But Dr. Vance had suggested it, and Ruth had mentioned that many of her clients found value in connecting with others who understood. The first meeting, Vivian sat in the corner and did not speak. She listened to other women share their stories. A young mother who had left with her children in the middle of the night. An older woman whose husband of 40 years had broken her wrist the week before their anniversary. A professional woman in her 30s who had been financially controlled so completely she did not know how to open a bank account. Different circumstances. Different details. But underneath, the same story. Control. Isolation. Fear. The slow dismantling of self that happened when you lived with someone who believed they owned you. At the second meeting, Vivian introduced herself. My name is Vivian. I left my husband 6 weeks ago. He was not the person I thought I married. Or maybe he was, and I just did not see it until I could not ignore it anymore. The other women nodded. They understood. That was the thing about the group. No explanations were necessary. No justifications required. They had all lived some version of the same story. After the meeting, a woman approached her. Around her age. Dark hair streaked with silver. Kind eyes. I am Margaret. I have been coming here for 2 years. It gets better. I know that sounds like something people say, but it actually does get better. When did you start believing that? Margaret thought about it. Maybe a year in. When I woke up one morning and realized I had not thought about him in 3 days. That was when I knew I was actually healing, not just surviving. Vivian was not there yet. She still thought about Garrett constantly. Still tensed when she heard footsteps in the hallway outside her apartment. Still dreamed about the house on the harbor and woke up gasping. But Margaret's words gave her something to hold on to. A year. 3 days without thinking about him. A future where the past did not consume every waking moment. She could work toward that. Garrett's descent continued through autumn. Ruth kept her informed of the highlights, though Vivian tried not to focus too much on what was happening to him. Her energy was better spent on her own rebuilding. Still, some updates were impossible to ignore. The board concluded its investigation in late October. The findings were not public, but the result was. Garrett Holloway was terminated from the company his family had built. Not administrative leave. Not early retirement. Terminated for cause, with implications that made clear this was not a voluntary departure. The official statement mentioned conduct unbecoming of a senior executive. It did not specify what conduct. It did not need to. Everyone who mattered already knew. His house went on the market in November. The house on the harbor where Vivian had served 11 years of breakfasts. The house that had felt like a museum instead of a home. She saw the listing online and felt a strange pang of something that was not quite sadness and not quite satisfaction. That house had been her prison. But it had also been her life. The only adult life she had known. Seeing it reduced to a real estate listing with professional photographs and staged furniture felt like watching a grave being dug for a version of herself that had already died. She closed the browser and did not look again. Ruth called in early December with news about the divorce proceedings. His attorney is pushing for mediation. They want to settle before trial. Why? Because they know they will lose. The documentation you gathered is overwhelming. The photographs, the recordings, the financial evidence, the forged documents. Add in his termination and the protective order violations, and they have nothing to stand on. A trial would be humiliating for him. They want to avoid that. What do you recommend? Ruth paused. That depends on what you want. A settlement would be faster, cleaner. You would receive a significant amount and move on without the trauma of testifying. But a trial would create a public record. It would make clear, officially and permanently, what he did to you. Some clients need that. Some do not. What do you need? Vivian thought about it. She thought about standing in a witness box and describing the bruises. The fear. The years of diminishment. She thought about Garrett sitting at the defendant's table, forced to listen. She also thought about Margaret from the support group. About Dr. Vance. About the life she was building that had nothing to do with him. I want it to be over, she said finally. I want to move forward. I have spent enough of my life focused on him. Then we negotiate a settlement. I will make sure it reflects everything you are owed. The settlement was finalized in February. The terms were confidential, but the amount was substantial. Enough to never worry about money again. Enough to build whatever life she wanted. More importantly, the protective order was made permanent. Garrett Holloway was legally prohibited from contacting her for the rest of their lives. If he approached her, if he called her, if he sent a message through any intermediary, he would be arrested. Ruth delivered the final paperwork to her apartment. They sat at Vivian's small kitchen table, which she had painted bright blue because she could. It is done, Ruth said. You are divorced. The settlement is in escrow. The order is permanent. He has no legal claim on you anymore. Vivian signed the final document. Her hand did not shake. How do you feel? Ruth asked this the way Dr. Vance asked it. Open-ended. Without expectation. Vivian considered the question. Like I have been holding my breath for 11 years and I just exhaled. Ruth smiled. That is a good way to feel. After Ruth left, Vivian stood at her kitchen window. It did not overlook a harbor. There were no cargo ships drifting through fog. Just a parking lot and some trees and the ordinary landscape of a life that was finally her own. She was divorced. Financially secure. Legally protected. And she had no idea what to do next. The answer came from an unexpected direction. Vivian had continued volunteering at the non-profit where she had worked during her escape. The organization was called New Horizons. They provided services to families in crisis. Job training. Housing assistance. Legal advocacy. The kind of resources that could make the difference between someone staying trapped and someone getting free. She understood the value of those resources intimately now. In March, the executive director called her into his office. We have an opening, he said. Administrative coordinator. Part-time for now, but could become full-time. You would be working directly with clients. Intake. Program coordination. Some of it is paperwork, but a lot of it is sitting with people in the worst moments of their lives and helping them see a path forward. He paused. I know your background. I know what you have been through. I think that could be an asset here. But only if you feel ready. This work can be triggering. You would need to take care of yourself. Vivian thought about the women in her support group. About Margaret, who had started volunteering at a domestic violence hotline after her own healing progressed. About the way shared experience could become shared strength. I would like to try, she said. The job transformed something inside her. She was good at it. Better than she had expected. The clients responded to her in ways they did not respond to other staff. She understood why. She had been where they were. She knew the fear and the shame and the overwhelming paralysis of having no good options. She knew what it felt like to stay too long. She knew what it took to leave. She did not share her own story with clients unless it was relevant. But they seemed to sense something in her anyway. A recognition. An understanding that went beyond professional training. Within 6 months, she was promoted to full-time. Within a year, she was running the intake program. Within 2 years, the executive director began talking about succession planning and looking at her when he did. She was building a life. A real life. One that had meaning beyond surviving. The nightmares faded. The hypervigilance softened. She could go entire weeks without thinking about Garrett. But she thought about him the day she saw his name in the newspaper. It was a small article. Business section. A brief mention of a settlement between Garrett Holloway and several former business partners who had alleged fraudulent misrepresentation in a real estate deal. The settlement amount was not disclosed. The tone was neutral. But reading between the lines, it was clear that the man who had once been called a visionary was now settling lawsuits to avoid further public exposure of his conduct. Vivian read the article twice. Then she recycled the newspaper and went back to work. He was not her problem anymore. His consequences were his own. 3 years after the divorce, Vivian stood at a podium in a hotel ballroom and looked out at 200 faces. New Horizons was hosting its annual fundraising gala. She was executive director now. The promotion had come 6 months earlier, when her predecessor retired. She had not been sure she was ready. But everyone else seemed certain, and eventually their certainty had convinced her. Tonight she was giving the keynote address. 4 years ago, she began, her voice steady in the microphone. I was a woman with no job, no independent income, and no belief that I deserved better than the life I was living. I was married to a man who controlled everything about my existence. What I wore, what I ate, who I spoke to, what I thought about myself. I had been with him for so long that I had forgotten who I was without him. She paused. 200 faces waited. I left that marriage with a suitcase and a plan and the help of people who believed I deserved to be safe. People like the ones who work at organizations like ours. People who understand that leaving is not the end of the journey. It is the beginning. She talked about the work New Horizons did. The families they served. The outcomes they achieved. She talked about the gap between needing help and receiving it, and how donations made the difference. But mostly she talked about transformation. About the possibility of becoming someone new. About the fact that it was never too late to build a life worth living. After the gala, her sister found her by the bar. Colleen had moved closer after the divorce. Taken a job at a hospital 30 minutes from Vivian's apartment. They saw each other weekly now. Sunday dinners and Wednesday phone calls and the easy intimacy of sisters who had weathered storms together. That was beautiful, Colleen said, pulling her into a hug. Mom would have been so proud. She would have been horrified it took me so long to leave. She would have understood. Colleen pulled back to look at her. I understood. Everyone who has ever loved someone who was hurting them understands. It is not about being weak. It is about hoping things will change. Vivian's phone buzzed. A text from Margaret, who had become a close friend over the years. Just watched you on the live stream. You are an inspiration. Drinks this week? She typed back a yes and smiled. She had built more than a career. She had built a community. A network of people who understood her history and valued who she had become. A life that was full in ways that had nothing to do with the emptiness she had escaped. The encounter she had always known was possible happened on an ordinary Tuesday. Vivian was attending a conference on family services. A large hotel downtown. Workshops and panels and networking sessions designed to connect professionals in adjacent fields. She was walking toward the coffee station between sessions when she saw him. Garrett stood near the registration table, looking at the conference program. He was alone. He looked older than she remembered. Thinner. His suit did not fit the way his suits used to fit. His posture had lost some of its commanding certainty. For a moment, Vivian froze. Her body remembered fear before her mind could catch up. The racing heart. The cold hands. The instinct to make herself small and invisible. But the moment passed. She was not that woman anymore. She had not been that woman for years. She continued walking toward the coffee. She did not try to hide. She did not alter her route. She simply moved through the space as if he were not there, because in every way that mattered, he was not. He saw her as she reached for a cup. Their eyes met across 20 feet of conference carpet. She watched his face change. Surprise. Then something that looked like longing. Then something that looked like shame. He took a step toward her. "Vivian," he said. She held up her hand. Not dramatically. Just a simple gesture that meant stop. "No." That was all she said. One word. And then she turned and walked away. He did not follow. She did not expect him to. The protective order had been permanent. Any contact was a criminal offense. He might be diminished, but he was not stupid. She found a quiet corner near a window and stood there for several minutes, letting her heart rate return to normal. Letting her body understand that the threat had passed. A colleague found her a few minutes later. "Are you okay? You look pale." "I just saw my ex-husband." The colleague knew her history. Most people in her field did. "Do you want to leave?" Vivian considered the question. "No," she said finally. "I worked hard to be here. I'm not going to let him take this from me too." She went back to the conference. She attended the afternoon sessions. She networked and collected business cards and had a conversation about grant funding that might benefit New Horizons. And she did not see Garrett again. That evening, she called Dr. Vance. They had shifted to monthly check-ins long ago, but she still valued the connection. "I saw him today," Vivian said. "At a conference. How do you feel?" Vivian thought about it. Really thought about it, the way Dr. Vance had taught her. "I felt afraid for about 10 seconds. Then I felt angry. Then I felt nothing. Nothing. Not nothing like emptiness. Nothing like he just did not matter. Like he was a stranger who happened to share some of my history. I did not feel pulled toward him. I did not feel the need to confront him or hear his apology or make him understand what he did. I just wanted him to be somewhere else so I could continue with my day." Dr. Vance was quiet for a moment. "That is healing," she said finally. "That is what it looks like when someone truly has no power over you anymore. He is not your enemy. He is not your concern. He is simply someone who used to be in your life and is not anymore." After the call, Vivian sat on her couch in her apartment with its yellow walls and colorful art and thriving plants. She thought about the woman who had served breakfast with a bruised wrist and a secret plan. That woman had been terrified, exhausted, operating on survival instincts and desperate hope. This woman was different. This woman led an organization that helped hundreds of families every year. This woman had friends and community and purpose. This woman knew her own worth and would never again accept less than she deserved. They were the same person. But also not. Growth meant becoming someone new while carrying the wisdom of who you had been. The final piece of her healing came from an unexpected source. 5 years after the divorce, Vivian received a letter. It arrived at her office, addressed formally to Ms. Vivian Mercer. The return address was a law firm she did not recognize. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a smaller sealed envelope. The letter explained that Garrett Holloway had died 3 months earlier. Heart attack. Sudden. No suffering. The estate was being settled. As part of that process, they had found a sealed envelope addressed to her with instructions that it be delivered. They emphasized that she was under no obligation to read it. They were simply fulfilling the terms of his final wishes. Vivian stared at the sealed envelope for a long time. He was dead. The man who had controlled her life for 11 years was dead. She waited for something. Grief. Relief. Satisfaction. Something. What she felt was closer to weariness. A tiredness that came from having spent too much of her life focused on him already. She put the sealed envelope in her desk drawer. She finished her workday. She went home. She made dinner. She called Colleen and told her the news. Her sister's response was immediate. "Do not read it. Whatever he wrote, you do not need it. He does not get to have the last word." Colleen was probably right. But a week later, Vivian opened the envelope anyway. The letter was handwritten. 2 pages. His handwriting had always been precise, almost architectural. It was shakier now. Written, she realized, when he knew he was dying. Vivian, it began. I do not expect you to read this. I do not expect you to forgive me. I am not writing to ask for either. I am writing because I owe you the truth, and I was never brave enough to speak it while I was alive. I knew what I was doing. Every time I hurt you. Every time I controlled you. Every time I made you feel small. I knew. I told myself it was your fault, that you provoked me, that I was managing a difficult situation. But I knew. I knew, and I did it anyway because I was terrified of losing you. You were the best thing in my life, and I did not know how to love you without owning you. That is not an excuse. There is no excuse. I am simply telling you what was true. After you left, I lost everything. My company. My reputation. My family. The woman I thought I loved. All of it gone within a year. I wanted to blame you. For a long time, I did blame you. You had humiliated me. Destroyed me. Taken everything. But eventually I ran out of people to blame. And I had to look at what was left. What was left was a man who had spent his entire adult life believing that power meant control. That strength meant dominance. That love meant possession. I built an empire on those beliefs. And I destroyed my marriage with them. You did not destroy me, Vivian. I destroyed myself. You simply stopped protecting me from the consequences of who I was. I have been in therapy for 2 years now. Too late to matter. Too late to fix anything. But I understand things now that I did not understand when we were married. I understand that what I did to you was abuse. Not discipline. Not management. Abuse. I understand that you were right to leave. I understand that you owed me nothing. Not your presence. Not your forgiveness. Not your witness to my regret. I am dying now. The doctors say weeks. I find that I do not have much to say to the world I am leaving. But I have something to say to you. Thank you for leaving. If you had stayed, I would have destroyed you completely. I would have taken everything you were and remade it into something that served me. You would have disappeared entirely, and I would have convinced myself that was love. You saved yourself. And in doing so, you forced me to see myself clearly. I did not like what I saw, but seeing it was necessary. I hope you have built a beautiful life. I hope you have found people who love you without conditions. I hope you wake up every morning knowing that you are safe and valued and free. I hope you never think about me again after you read this. You deserved better than what I gave you. I am sorry I could not be better. I am sorry I chose control over love over and over again, until there was nothing left. Goodbye, Vivian. Garrett. Vivian read the letter 3 times. Then she sat at her kitchen table and cried. Not for him. Not for the marriage. Not for what could have been. She cried for the woman who had needed this letter 15 years ago. Who had needed him to see what he was doing and choose differently. Who had needed him to love her more than he needed to control her. That woman had waited and hoped and made herself small, and the letter never came. It came now, too late to matter. Too late to change anything. But somehow, it mattered anyway. Not because she needed his acknowledgement. She had healed without it. She had built a life without it. She had found her worth without any validation from him. But because it confirmed what she had always known. He had been capable of seeing the truth. He had been capable of understanding what he was doing. He had simply chosen not to. That choice was his. His responsibility. His burden to carry. And now he was gone, and she was still here. Still building. Still growing. Still becoming someone the woman who served that breakfast would never have imagined. She folded the letter and placed it back in its envelope. She would not read it again. She did not need to. But she would keep it. Not as a reminder of him, but as evidence of what she had survived. Proof that she had been right to leave. Confirmation that her judgment, the judgment he had spent 11 years undermining, had been correct all along. She had saved herself. And that was everything. The morning of her 60th birthday, Vivian stood at the window of her office at New Horizons and watched the sun rise. 21 years since the breakfast. 21 years since she had served eggs and toast to a man who thought he owned her, while planning her escape. The organization had grown beyond anything she had imagined. 3 locations now. 50 employees. Thousands of families served every year. A reputation as one of the most effective family services organizations in the region. She had built that. Her and her team. From the ground up. Colleen was coming for dinner tonight. Margaret too. A few other friends from the life she had constructed piece by piece over 2 decades. There would be cake. There would be laughter. There would be the easy joy of people who knew each other's histories and celebrated each other's victories. Vivian thought about the woman she had been at 39. Bruised and silent and desperately planning her escape from a kitchen that overlooked a harbor. That woman felt like a stranger now. But also not. That woman had been brave in ways Vivian had not recognized at the time. That woman had survived impossible circumstances. That woman had found the strength to leave when everything in her life had been designed to keep her trapped. This woman, the one standing at the window at 60, was built from that foundation. Every choice, every healing, every step forward had started with a decision that woman made in a kitchen at dawn. To stop performing submission. To start building freedom. To believe, against all evidence, that she deserved a life worth living. She had believed it. And she had been right. The sun cleared the horizon. Light poured through the window. The office filled with warmth. Vivian picked up her coffee and sat down at her desk. There was work to do. There was always work to do. Families to help. Systems to navigate. Lives to rebuild. She had spent 11 years trapped in someone else's idea of who she should be. She had spent the next 21 becoming herself. The math was simple. More years of freedom than years of captivity. More life ahead than life lost. More purpose than pain. She opened her laptop and began her day. Outside the window, the sun continued to rise. And Vivian Mercer, who had once been Vivian Holloway, who had once been a woman serving breakfast with a bruised wrist and a secret plan, smiled. She had entered that marriage believing love required surrender. She had left it understanding that love, real love, required nothing of the kind. And everything she had built since then, the career, the community, the life that was entirely her own, was proof that it was never too late to begin again. That was the lesson. Not that she had been strong enough to leave, but that she had been brave enough to become someone worth being. The story ends here. But hers continued. That is the nature of survival. It is not a destination. It is a direction. And Vivian kept walking forward. One day at a time. One choice at a time. One breath at a time. Free.